Welcome back to Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Dave Charest, the Director of Small Business Success at Constant Contact, which provides powerful tools to simplify and amplify digital marketing for businesses. Previously, he was the Director of Content Marketing and Senior Manager of Content and Social Media Marketing at the company. Dave is also a speaker, host, and podcaster obsessed with helping small businesses find time online for their online marketing since 2006. Dave, welcome to the show.
Ashley, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to talk with you.
Likewise, I'd love to have you start off by sharing more about who you are and what your role is at Constant Contact.
Yeah. I'm coming up on 15 years at Constant Contact, actually. September will be my 15th year. And I've essentially grew up in the industry in content marketing. And that's how I started at Constant Contact. I started as a content developer, kind of worked my way up, was director of content marketing, and then moved into speaking on a regular basis and talking to small businesses. And essentially, even today, as I'm doing some work with our partners, for example, really, my whole career has been about education. Educating small businesses on how to take advantage of these new digital tools at the time, anyway, right? And new digital tools. And now I would say maybe not so much new, but ever changing
Mhm.
digital tools. And what's interesting as I say that out loud, ever changing, one of the constants in all of that, and I'm sure you would agree, email marketing is kind of the backbone of any digital strategy, right? And
Yeah.
so when you start to think about that, it's great to be at a company like Constant Contact that's been around for 30 plus years, and really focused on a singular mission of helping small businesses compete with their larger rivals. And although the technology has changed and we've added more to the platform and things have changed in that realm, that core has always been the same. And it gets really interesting these days now with AI really getting to that place where it can be more accessible,
Mhm.
not only by companies like ourselves, but for small business owners, of course. I'd be curious to, as we get into the conversation today, how maybe some of the ways you're using it, even with the podcast and some of the work that you do, but even just what it allows us to give our customers
Yeah.
in terms of just the ability to do things with, and many times just in the background, right? Like I don't think people need to know that it's AI helping them do this thing. They just want to get this thing done. And throughout the years, I think what we've seen is many small businesses, they get started because they have a passion about doing something that they love to do.
Mhm.
And marketing is one of those necessary evils to get the word out, right? And it's not something that they may have the skill set in. But the landscape is evolving. We have a report I'm sure we'll dig into a little bit here today that'll go into some of the things that we're seeing with small businesses now. But that's kind of been my journey. I started as I started my own business for a little while and was doing that. And I was this is where I taught myself and learned all these things and learned really quickly that I'm not so great at the business parts. I was really good at the marketing pieces and the things that I did, not unlike our small businesses. But the running the business was the tough piece, and so I was very fortunate to find a role at Constant Contact, which allowed me to really focus on that education and doing those things, and not have to worry so much about the other things that you need to do to keep your business going. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for the people that make it happen and
Mhm.
can continue on because it's a it's an interesting step to take, and there's a
Yeah.
lot involved in it that not a lot of people realize. And having to wear all those hats and then add marketing to the mix, I understand that pain. And so, yeah, so excited to be here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. I'd love to dive more into your role. So, as the director of small business success, what does that typically entail? What are the responsibilities that you might have or the types of projects that you work on?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of that revolves around, I've hosted a podcast for Constant Contact. I've speaking on stages, keynoting, webinars, all of that stuff, really focused on education. And so really understanding how do we, I like to say we a lot of times marketers will get together and we're very focused on marketing. We geek out
Mhm.
about marketing. We love it. And we forget that the small business owner just wants to know how to do something and how they can get more people in the door. And so it's really about finding some clarity, understanding what are the things that work, what are the things that you should be paying attention to, and also helping small businesses understand that they don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
And there are people like yourself, and we have a whole network of partners at Constant Contact that if you do need someone that goes beyond just using our product, for example, you can find those people that do geek out about the marketing, can help you apply that to your business. And I think one of the other things that's nice about, Constant Contact is that if you do get stuck, you can actually call up and speak to
Yeah.
somebody on the phone, which I think is becoming even more important as we get into this AI world, right? And so, yeah, so my role really is all about thinking about the ways that we can educate small businesses and get them to understand how these tools will apply to their business, and then what they can do, and help them overcome that first step. I often say there's a lot of baggage involved with marketing in many instances because you kind of get in your own way.
Mhm.
It's particularly when you're not used to doing it, it feels like a thing that you have to, like, you're okay, I'm going to put on the marketing hat, and you're like, okay, now I'm marketing. And you
Yeah.
start talking differently, and you start doing things that you wouldn't typically do, and you're like, why are you doing that? Right? And so I think that becomes increasingly more important today. But like, or it's being yourself. It's getting the word out about your businesses, and getting your business seen,
Yeah.
and doing those things that, that's really what I'm focused on trying to help people do, is like, how do they, when not only understand what they can do within our product, but also understand the why behind why they would want to do that. And then again, where to focus, and get the most kind of bang for the time that you do have, that you can find in many instances to do marketing as a small business owner.
Definitely. A lot of our audience is comprised of small business owners who are newer. So they might
Yeah,
be a few months in, they are likely juggling it with a full-time role with the hopes of taking their business full-time. And so to your point, they're kind of just getting started with all these digital marketing opportunities and strategies that they can consider. So with that being said, email marketing does tend to be something that they feel a little bit overwhelmed by and confused about and how to
sure.
actually get started. And so I'd love to pick your brain about that as a business owner who's looking to really begin their email marketing strategy. What should they keep in mind?
Yeah. Well, so I'll start with saying a couple of things here. I think the latest study that we looked at, we saw that, the businesses are really doubling down on kind of two things, right? Social
Mhm.
media and email marketing. And I think this is really important because when you think about social media, particularly today, it's really fantastic for getting discovered.
Mhm.
The platforms are really trying, it's less about like who follows you and more about what are the things that you're talking about, and will that be of interest to somebody. And so the platforms are really trying to get whatever content that you create and put online in front of the people that they think will find it valuable. And so the challenge, though, of course, is that you don't really own those relationships on social media. And so this is where the email piece comes in. And we think this is really great in terms of how small businesses are really thinking about it, is like, yes, I'll get discovered here, but then I'll start to own that relationship. And so that way, if something happens, right, I'm sure you've run into this too with clients or yourself, right? A social site goes down, an algorithm changes, it messes with your whole juju, right, in terms of what you're trying to do there. And so, but if you have that list, the phrase, oh, the money is in the list, that group of people that have raised their hand to stay connected to you, that you get to decide when you want to reach them, or at least reach out to them, right? Again, the landscape changes, and even inboxes are changing a little bit here. But we see that even today, email has one of the highest returns on investment in terms of, the dollars that you put in investing in it. And it's a relatively low cost tool, and particularly when you're first starting, right? Because it's typically based on the size of the audience that you have. Um, but that allows you to use a tool that hopefully gets you in this situation where it's paying for itself, and
Yeah.
beyond that, right? Because you're generating income from and sending those messages, and really building those relationships. I think that's where you get the introduction on social media, but you can really start to build that relationship when you get into the email piece of it.
Definitely. And for a small business, what have you found to be the best, and this is of course a little bit broad, but the best and most effective way to build and grow that email list to ensure that it's full of high quality contacts?
Yeah, of course. So a few things. I think I'll caution the number one thing. If you're a business owner, at some point someone's going to reach out to you and ask you, "Hey, I've got this highly qualified list of people that you might be trying to reach. You want to buy that list?" And time again, we see those lists really don't live up to the hype,
Right.
right? And I think the difference here is that even if you were to get a list of quality people on there, you're kind of it's still a cold call in many instances, and people are it's different than showing up on someone's social feed because email is a bit more of a private space in many ways, and people kind of feel like they're getting invaded if you're reaching out to them in that space, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really about getting that permission. And so, in order to do that, you need to think about, okay, what are the ways you can start to move people closer, right? So, if you think of you have social media, you're doing things there, maybe you develop what we'd call a lead magnet, right? Is there something that you can offer that's maybe a checklist or a piece of exclusive content related to your business that may help that potential customer solve a particular problem that they might be working on? And that gives them something in exchange for that email address. The other piece of it is, we've seen in this study too that many business owners are now identifying as creators, because the reality is content is what fuels everything that we're doing online. And so you kind of have to put on another hat as a small business owner, right? And be that creator now. And it's through that creation of content, if you're creating things people look forward to seeing, sometimes it's just the promise of what the future content will be that may be a little bit different than what you would get on social media. I think you kind of have to think about it as what is the exclusivity of being in this channel versus this channel.
Mhm.
Same if you wanted to add SMS, for example. How do you use that in a way that's additive to the experience versus, I think a trap we see people fall into is they just do the same thing on every channel. And I think following a theme through every channel is more important than doing a copy paste across every channel. Because as you start to um, branch out and maybe you start on one channel and you move to another one, which we recommend that people do because it gets overwhelming if you're trying to do everything all at once and you kind of just end up spinning your wheels versus choosing a channel, focusing there and figuring out how that works for your business. um, that really starts to become overwhelming. And so you want to really stay focused on how can you focus and get people moving. But I think that's it. It's really looking at using the channels that you have, looking at the opportunities that you have to be in front of your potential customers, whether that's in person, whether that's online, at events, whatever that is. You want to take advantages of those connection points that you have. If you meet somebody, give them the opportunity to stay connected, right? On your website, make sure you have a sign up form on there. Have directing people, like letting them know what they're going to get. And it all depends on the nature of the business, right? Sometimes discounts, sometimes exclusive contents. Sometimes, and we're seeing this even more and more today, people really want to support small businesses. And just the fact that you're small, sometimes people will stay connected just because they want to show their support. And so all of those things are the things that you really just make it part of your process. If you have staff, if you're fortunate enough to be in a place where you have staff at a shop or something, make that part of their processes too. As people come in, hey, you want to join our email list? You want to do this? You'll get this or you'll get that. Focus on what they're going to get in exchange, the value exchange there. And if you can make that part of your processes, it may be slow and steady. If you want to put a kind of jolt in some of those things, you can try to find other businesses that you can partner with so you can try to steal some of that audience, right? And do those things. But I think you start thinking about like that and understand just the value and having people that you can reach out to on a regular basis to keep your business top of mind. Ultimately, that will pay off and help you build those relationships that become more meaningful to you.
Totally. One thing that you mentioned that I'd like to dive further into is the small business report that Constant Contact had put together and published. And so I'd love to hear more about those key findings that you've discovered and how they can apply to Massachusetts small business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we saw, I'll kind of give you a synopsis and then we can kind of dig into each of them. And we've touched on some of the things here today in the conversation. But ultimately, it's no joke. We're in a place where there's lots of uncertainties, a bit of a difficult economy. And what we've been finding during this time is that small business owners are actually kind of changing how they operate a bit, right? So as I mentioned, they're becoming creators, right? They're identifying as that. They're actually embracing AI, and they're really doubling down on those, direct customer relationships because at the end of the day, and I'm sure you would agree, that's what gives them the best chance of growing regardless of what's happening, right? And so if we dig into each of those a little bit more, the creator piece of it, this is kind of one of the biggest changes with owning a small businesses right now, because you're actually wearing that content creator hat. And
Yeah.
so, if you think 20 years ago you owned a bakery, what'd you do? You baked, right? Today it's like, okay, you bake and you're filming a TikTok video, you're doing a reel, right? You're responding to comments, you're writing your newsletters, you're doing all of this other stuff that you're like, oh, now I'm doing this now. And so it's become less of like marketing being a thing. Maybe you hire someone to do once a month, right? It's now just become part of running the business. And so if we dig into some of the numbers there, 73% of the people that we talk to actually identify as creators. So that's a hefty amount. Nearly half manage their social channels themselves. And we're actually finding that social is now the number one discovery tool ahead of search, even in terms of how people or consumers are finding businesses. And so what's interesting that I think, as we've talked about a little bit here, is that social media has become kind of the front door that, although that's true, most small business owners know that it can't be the whole house, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what gets us to this piece of this combo of where email marketing comes in, right? And so
Mhm.
we talked about that idea that social media is fantastic for getting discovered, but it's that email where those relationships really start to get built. And I think it's really good to see this because, as we mentioned, social media is kind of that rented land. You don't own that list. You don't have control over what happens there. And as they're building their email list, almost half of the people that we talk to, the business owners that we talk to, believe that they would survive if social media disappeared tomorrow. And so that tells you something when you think about that, right? It's learned that they've understand that they need to have those owned audiences, that those customer relationships are really important. And it's also more about generating repeat business than necessarily getting new business all the time. And
Yeah.
it's not just about, right, viral reach when you start to think about that. And I think to dig into that third thing, when we start talking about AI, that's really more of a core business tool at this point. If you think about where the conversation started, it's changed dramatically. 2 years ago, you would have maybe had people asking if they should use it. And today it's, where does it fit into the workflow? And so, one of the things we recognize, of course, at Constant Contact is, as we mentioned, right, small business owners don't necessarily have marketing departments. And so um, we know that every hour that AI can save its time for someone, they can actually spend that serving customers, building products, or growing the business. And that's why it's important, to us to be a partner that helps them take advantage of that technology. And so, yeah, some interesting things that happening there. Um, and it's good to see the way business owners are thinking about it holistically, and that they're doing things that take action. I'm always I don't want to say surprised. I'm always just respectful of business owners who are thrown a challenge every year at something different, or a little different, or the same thing coming around again, but they're always trying to find a way to say, okay, what do I need to do to
Mhm.
make this, and whatever this particular storm may be, if we call it that.
Absolutely. One of the findings that you mentioned that I think is really interesting is that rise in the creator.
Mm.
So businesses, as to your point, are now kind of really stepping into being the face of their brand and creating all this content. But as you mentioned earlier, it's something that can be super time consuming for a business owner, especially when they wear so many different hats. And
Yeah.
so, in your experience and throughout your career and what you've been able to do with your own marketing, what's your advice for how they can manage their marketing while managing everything else and
Yeah.
ensuring that it gets done without falling to the bottom of the to-do list and then therefore being forgotten about forever?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to recognize is that it's something that you do have to make time for.
Hmm.
And that's just as simple as whatever that time allotment that you have to put that in the calendar.
Hmm.
And you have to have that dedicated, because here's what happens. As a small business owner, you start your day and then things blow up, right? And then you've got to go take care of this, and you got to go take care of that. And then, your intentions have always been, I got to do this thing. I know I got to do that. And then something else pulls you in another direction and you never come back. And if you don't have that time dedicated in the calendar, it's easy to let it slip
Hmm.
because and then like the end of the week comes, you're like, oh no, I didn't do that thing. And I think that's the number one thing is understand that it's a thing that you have to schedule, just like any other work that you want to get done.
Yeah.
And so if you start there, good. Whatever that time allotment is, even if it's 15 minutes, this is 15 minutes. I'm going to focus on this. You can start to break up the tasks, put them together, and so you know how you move along. If you are someone who just understands how it works and you're in a place where you can hire someone like yourself, one of our constant contact partners, right? Those are the people that can help you execute on those things. But I think it's that. It's putting the time in the calendar and then saying, okay, what's most important for me right now, understanding what your goal is. I think this is also another big mistake that comes around where everyone has an idea of what you should do, and you should be wary of people giving you advice without first asking, what is it that you're trying to do? Because we all have access to the same tools at the end of the day. How we use them, though, depends on what it is that we're trying to do at a particular moment in time with our business. And so maybe it's really important. I've got to really try to grow my email list. So the activities, you may be using the same channels, but the activities that you're doing are a little bit different. Maybe it's like, oh, I have to move particular inventory, or I need to focus on an event that I'm running, right? All of those things kind of put you in a different frame of mind and help you think about how you're going to use those tools. And so I think that is the other thing. And so taking a look at what you have available to you, making a plan for what it is that you're trying to do tied to a business goal, and then actually scheduling the time so you can execute on those things. I think if you think about it in that way, it becomes a lot easier to actually move forward and get going in a way that you haven't before if you didn't take those steps to begin with.
Correct. And on the topic of tools, that's one of the things that business owners struggle with, I think sometimes is like analysis paralysis of like, there's
Yeah.
so many tools, how do I know which one to go with? Especially
Yeah.
when it comes to email marketing with Constant Contact. Then you also have MailChimp and Flowdesk and Kit
Sure.
and kind of thinking about which one is the best fit. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective why Constant Contact is a good choice for small business owners and things that it might offer that makes it really unique.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things come to mind. I think first and foremost, our tool was designed for small business owners who have to market
Mhm.
versus marketers who know what they're doing and right have to. I think, there are so many tools out there that you have to spend some time figuring out how to use it and what to do with it and understand the bells and whistles and sometimes hire a whole team to make that thing work for you. I think the nice thing about Constant Contact, it is designed for small business owners who don't have marketing background necessarily, and it's easy to use. We
Mhm.
hear that time and time again. If you can create a Word document, you can create an email, you can, do whatever that you need to do within Constant Contact. It's designed that way specifically, and it gets even easier when you start adding that element of AI, as we've been talking about here. For example, you can go into Constant Contact and chat with it and say, hey, I have a sale coming up next month. It's about this, about that. I'd love to create a campaign that helps me promote that.
Mhm.
And then what Constant Contact will do within minutes is give you some social post ideas, give you the email, a series of emails that you want to use, an SMS if you're going to use text messaging, right? Maybe you have an event associated with that. It will create the bones of a whole campaign for you in a matter of minutes, which I think, and oftentimes again we forget that, yeah, you got to do some marketing. Okay, cool. But marketing entails all of this planning
Yeah.
and figuring out what to say in that message. What do I say in this one? What do I do in that one? And so to get from point A to point B is a very long, arduous distance that sometimes the business owner gets lost in.
Yeah.
And so our goal with Constant Contact is really to shorten that distance so
Mhm.
that someone has the idea and then can execute on it because doing something is oftentimes better than doing nothing. And that allows you to take an action so that you can learn something. I think one of the other pieces to think about is that marketing in general should be approached in many ways as a testing ground, right? With a testing mentality, because every audience is a little different, every business is a little different. And when you do something, you learn something. And that allows you to make changes and it allows you to do something else. But it's the doing that gets you moving and gets you the benefit versus you mentioned the analysis paralysis, right? Even coming from aside from tools, just what it is that you want to do and execute on it or wait for it to be perfect, right? I
Yeah.
think these tools come in, AI, constant contact included with the AI pieces that allow you to get something out the door so that you're doing something and learning something. The other piece I'll add is that, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody at constant contact, and that's one thing many of our competitors don't have. And we recognized early on that business owners sometimes don't have the time to go read the blog post on how to do the thing, go to the KB. We have those tools if people want them, that, watch the webinar, whatever. But sometimes you're just trying to get something finished or something out the door and you're stuck. You
Yeah.
can pick up the phone, talk to somebody, and there's somebody there that's ready to help walk you through it. And I think that those are the big things that really, design for small business owners, and there's people that you can talk to. Those are the big things that for me help constant contact stand out from the competitors.
Definitely. And although it's only August, so many of us small business owners are already thinking about Q4 and even 2027. And so, from a marketing perspective, what are some things that small business owners should keep in mind when it comes to finishing out the year strong and
Yep.
also setting a solid foundation for the year ahead?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll mention here. And you're right, this end of the year time that we're coming up on, which seems crazy to say already. Well, let us enjoy the summer. At least we've got another month, right? But it's true. Like as a business owner, you actually have to start planning for this stuff now
Hmm.
because so many businesses rely on this end of the year, this Q4, to really be, I can remember talking to a customer of ours who says, that this holiday season really that comes up here is when I put the wood in the shed. And what he meant by that is this is where I know how I'm going to have to plan my next year because this is where I make the brunt of my money, right? So it helps him start to figure out what he needs to do. And so, yeah, it's that. It's making sure that you're thinking about, okay, what are these busy times? What are these holidays that I can take advantage of? Again, it's all going to depend on the nature of your business, right? But it's getting that planning done now while you may have a little bit of a slower period, let's say in the summer months. Of course, this depends on the seasonality of your business, right? But if you can do that now versus trying to do those things while you're also in your busiest season, right? Again, it becomes that thing like, oh, I want to do that. I have the best intentions to, but you don't actually get to it. And so
Yeah.
I think it's taking advantage of that, looking at the lay of the land. Again, I always talk about this idea of review, plan, execute, right? Take a look at what happened last year. What did you do? Do we need to change something? Do we need to do something different? What is our goal for this year? Okay, how do we meet that goal? If you can do that planning now, then you can start to put the pieces in place to execute. You can start scheduling messages. You can start setting up automations, right? You can start taking the time to do all of that now so that when you're busy, these things are just working for you. And I think that's the big thing is like take advantage of this. There's no such thing as downtime, but the slower period, if you have it, take advantage of that when you have them, right? Because again, like I said, every business is a little different depending on the seasonality, but take advantage of those times to put these pieces in place because that's going to help you get even better results from those important periods for your business.
Yeah, I love that. And now for anyone who's listening to this episode who is looking to build a career in marketing, I'd love to hear what advice you'd have to give them from your extensive experience that you've had throughout the past several years.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the big thing for me is, I've always said to my teams over the years, like all good things come from focusing on the people that you're trying to reach and helping them become successful.
Mhm.
And that means you've got to keep the customer front and center in all that you're doing. And that means talking to customers. I'm always surprised at how many marketers like will sit in a room and I'm like, I'm always like, the worst thing we can do is sit in this room and pretend we can come up with the ideas or know what the business owner is going through. So speak to them and you got to have somebody that's like a champion for that, right? And bringing that to the conversation because, I think we even started this conversation with like just the idea of a business owner, the stress involved with
Mhm.
having to be responsible for one, your income, your livelihood, potentially the livelihood and income of other people. That's sometimes the stress that people working for another company, for example, where their job is to do something focused without having to worry about those pieces, right? You don't have that. And so it's easy to get lost in like, oh, you just do this and that, right? Without the, yeah, I know I got to do this and that, but I also have all of this to worry about, right? And
Yeah.
so the more you can do that and bring that to the table and then map that to what is it that you're trying to do? It's similar in many ways, right? You've got a review, you got a plan, you got to execute, right? And so how do those things come together so that you can make your customer more successful, which ultimately at the end of the day will make your business more successful? And I think if you can come at it with that lens, and the other piece I would add is just internally, whatever place that you're working at, if you're at a place where you're working, where you're doing this on your own, I think if you can always approach those things as strategically collaborative, right? Where oftentimes, sometimes people think they know what they need or they don't know what they need. And it really has to start with that question of like, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Then we can come up with an idea of like, oh, actually, you don't need that thing. I would recommend doing this thing because this will get us the outcome in a better way, right? And
Yeah.
so I think if you can, that for me have been a couple of things. Put the customer first and be collaborative and think through it. Be a strategic partner versus an order taker. Will help you have more value with whatever organization you're in, or if you're starting your own thing, whoever you're working with as clients. I think will help you a lot better.
Love that. Great advice. Dave, this has been such a great episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the show to talk about everything that you have been up to at Constant Contact and how businesses can leverage the platform and even take their marketing strategy to the next level. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say LinkedIn is the best place to find me personally. Dave Charest on LinkedIn. That's Charest. And of course, if you want to learn more about Constant Contact, you can visit constantcontact.com. And we have tons of free resources there as well, webinars, blog posts, all of those things, the reports like we've been talking about here today, if you want to learn more. So come definitely say hello, and I'd love to connect with you.
Amazing. And I'll include those places in the show notes for listeners to easily find you and all those amazing resources you mentioned. Thank you so much again for coming on this week's episode.
Ashley, pleasure. Thank you.